So thanks for joining me today. We're going to be looking at managing donor households, and I'm Bob Wolf with Agilon, and we'll be walking you through a couple different best practices for households. As the session name implies here, what we want to do is make sure that you guys are using some of the tools that we've built into one to help you manage householding. Being able to manage households is very critical to how you do your business. So we'll be looking at some of those best practices and looking at really different types of two different definitions for householding. Um, at least this is how I've broken it down. For example, when I'm sending out correspondence, I may want to reduce the quantity of mail pieces being sent out by only sending one letter per household. So that definition of household that we might use around sending something out or reducing mail pieces or reducing emails by household is a little different than when we do households for determining a contribution. So instead of basing it on a physical address and a family unit, we might be calculating household giving based on a constituent and their significant other, or whoever else we might be tying together to create that kind of household giving. So I want to talk today about how to maintain those two types of household records within one, and some of the ways that we've modified our processes to handle those. So a contribution household, when you're trying to determine a number, a dollar amount that can be used to represent a donor or a donor's total combined giving, that's what I'm going to be calling a contribution household. There's several ways to see totals of giving. One of those being this the giving summary page, where we show giving from this year, the year before, the year before, the year before, lifetime giving, and those are certainly reasonable. Some of our clients are not creating a constituent record for each of the constituents, meaning a constituent record for Marcia, my wife, and for myself, each being separate constituent records. They're creating one constituent record. Something like the giving summary page might work just fine for that. Um, and the data points are pretty easy to get to. They're all in the master record. Um, but since most of you are creating multiple constituents, which is what we've recommended, one for each spouse, we really want to look at a combined giving total for a spouse or for this household. Giving summary only includes the donor hard credit giving, even though it's pretty easy to get out of the master table. What we recommend is using gift clubs and household givings. One of the things we added last year was the ability to have household giving display on that giving summary page with a new section called household giving. That's not magic. Household giving is a gift club that lets us combine different types of giving for a constituent that includes their personal hard credit giving, soft credits that maybe they've gotten credit for, as well as the different related giving. The related giving and or the spouse giving are all part of that definition you can build for this gift club. We know those gift clubs are scheduled to run. They can run every night. They can run every week to refresh. But the idea is that will do that combination of giving for you and provide you with a single data point which you can use. In order for that household giving number to display on the giving summary page, we do need to set up a special control info record called TOT giving _ gift club. That is where you would set the name of the gift club, that you want to be used for household giving. And if that's turned on, this new section shows up in Giving Summary called Household Giving. You can see the breakdown of how we came up with that total. For the record we're looking at right now, that $23,000 number, that has been calculated from looking at hard credit gifts as well as pledges and soft credit giving. There wasn't any spouse or related giving that was part of this, but it would be easy to see where that money came from. And the bottom image there shows what we would actually see within the gift club. So this is called lifetime household giving, and there's rules set up to tell us what is being combined. So again, we recommend using a gift club just because of the ability to write rules around how you want to or what should be combined. And that allows us to get to that information, although it's not as simple as looking at a master record that has the value there. You can see this in multiple places. This total is visible in, of course, the gift club pages, because that's where it originates from. But that's where all the other gift clubs are, so it can kind of get lost. I may not want to have my development officers, going to the gift club page to find that total. What I would probably do is allow them to see it on the giving summary page if that's a page that you like. It's nice to be able to see it in that household giving section. Or if you are really restrictive and you don't want to grant that access, there is an option as part of the header control, the H system, the HG group, or the HU user setup to include that specific gift club value in the header. And the other place that you can get to this, I know this might look like a lot going on here at the bottom of the page with that query. The query itself is a little more complex because I don't know which gift club you want to use for your household giving. So I've gone out to the control record to find it. This could be made simpler by just hard coding in the value that you're using for the giving summary. But basically, we can include this as an include into any of our queries and have this run as a subquery to pull in the household giving number. Whether or not you're going to use that in mailing, whether or not you're going to use that in a report that's being delivered to development officers, it's a nice number to get to. Again, because we can use those rules for gift clubs, it can be a very useful number. Once we've looked at this contribution household and we understand how to come up with those totals, we'd really want to move into looking at how can we come up with a good household definition for correspondence or for sending a mail out. We found that simply limiting the results of a mailing, say if I pulled a mailing and if I just added a feature in there that said only give me one row where the addresses are the same, we found that was really too restrictive. We learned that control over the members of this household went beyond just living at the same address. And that's where even though we may start with matches on an address, we give you the ability, once you have seen those people that live at the same address, to identify whether or not they should really be at the same household. So we start with sharing an address, but then it goes beyond that. So in order to start setting up these correspondence households, we need to be able to find out who lives together, who shares an address. And in order to see that function or turn that function on when you're on an address record, you need to enable the control record called household option and set that to yes. That will kick off the address match process. Lets us see, as we're looking at somebody's address, whether or not there's anybody else in the database that shares that same address. So setting that to yes, that was something that was new in 4.4. So the purpose of looking at those people that have an address match is to give you a way to join those people who live together as a household so that they can be put together when we do mailings or limited. So that if I have my two daughters and they're on the mailing list as being children of an alumni, and I'm doing a mailing out to everybody who is in the database that lives in a certain area, I may not want to send a letter out to Bob and Marcia and Ellie and Emma and Dakota, even though they might live at the same address. I want to limit that down to only those one letter per household. That's kind of what we're getting to. So similar to the selection wizard feature that lets you do the one per household, which is based entirely on whether or not you and your spouse both show up in the mail list. This one looks at a new relationship that gets created from that address match. And by building that special relationship through that address match page, that means that when we run Selection Wizard query, and Denise and I were just talking about that before, this does require that you're using the distribution process in Selection Wizard. But when you run that, instead of just utilizing the one per household function, you can use this new function, the old function, which was one per household, is based on spouse ID. The new function is based on this household relationship. So not only will this be able to show you the household members and limit them to a single household, it can also produce then a new or unique household salutation. Instead of having it say Bob Wolf and Marcia Wolf or have it set up like that, it returns then instead the Wolf family or the Wolf household, however you have the salutation built out for returning households. One of the features, so this is the address match page. So when I'm looking at somebody's address, there'll be an indicator that says, hey, there's other people that live at the same address. Once you click on that button, you're going to be getting this screen that says, hey, here's those people that match. And then you can make a decision. If you have the household function turned on, so this is beyond just address match, if you have the household function enabled, you'll be able to identify of these people who is considered the head of household. So if we look at this list, the very top person on this list of people is Robert Wolf, and that's the top person is always going to be the address that you are looking at the matches for. So Robert Wolf lives at 1935 Silver Maple Trail, and I can see below that Marcia, and she's got a check mark underneath or an X under the SP column, so that lets me know that she's my spouse. And I must not have any child relationships built with Dakota and Emma and Eleanor, because those are my children. I would normally see an X there if I have those relationships built. But I can still see these are all people who share this address. And so now I can decide who's the head household. Doesn't really matter who you set up as head household. It does not have to be Robert or the first one on the list. It could be anyone in that household. So in this case, I will mark myself as head of household. So I put a check mark in that head column. And then I can decide, well, who's part of that household. Now, one of the things that's a little bit strange about this when we set it up, although it makes sense from the back end, the head of household needs to be part of the household as well. So they are both a head of household with that checkbox, and they're a member of the household as well. So I check this with a head, and then over on the left-hand side, I indicate for that person, Robert Wolf, whose household do they belong to. And I will choose myself again. And so for everybody that's in my household, so Marcia's in the household, Dakota's in the household, Emma and Ellie and and Penny, they're all part of the Robert Wolf household. And I've done that just by hitting the drop down of everybody that's in that specific household. And then I can save that. So this is creating relationships on these addresses for these people that indicate that they are part of the same household. Organizations cannot be part of a household. So that's why my Wolf Enterprise, even though it shares an address, that organization can't be part of a household. Cannot be part of a household. Even though these records are being built, and for those of you who are familiar with the constituent contact functionality that's in one, we're using that functionality in the back end, but I don't want you to touch it in there because it's very specific about how the relationships are built. But once you add the the head of household in this address match page and save this, the contact relationships get built. And the way to manage them then is to simply go back into the address or any of those addresses where the address match exists and remove people. And that would be by saying, okay, we don't want Penny as a part of this household anymore. Maybe she's moving along and moving out of the house. So all you need to do is take Robert Wolf, that household, you just remove that from this row, and that will remove the necessary relationships. And make the save. And that is how you manage those. The household features used to affect Selection Wizard and the way that we're using that contact distribution. I'm going to run through how this might look. There's a lot of columns, so I'm going to try to point out what's really changing. So again, this is dependent upon using Selection Wizard. It's depending upon using an output template that's set up with distribution. If you're already using salutations in your Selection Wizard queries, you already know how this runs. So this is an example of a Selection Wizard page. So at the very top, we see some of your options for choosing how salutations are built. And at the bottom of the page, this result, I don't remember the exact query that I used, probably who lives at 1935 Silver Maple Trail. So I have this list of all of these people, and you'll notice that the distribution ID and the ID are the same for each of these. And all of these rows are in here. So one of the functions that has existed before, although the name has changed, we have the one per household spouse. And Marcia and Bob are married. So if I were to click on that one per household spouse and rerun this query, I would end up with having the Robert Wolf line and the Marcia Wolf line combined into a single line. So now we can see that those have been grouped. Marcia's no longer on that list because I want to mail to one per household using that spouse relationship as the key. What we've done with the householding is we've added this new option in the top. You see it's called one per household contact. We've also added a contact data export. So I'm going to talk about both of those pieces of this process. So first of all, the contact data export. This utilizes the constituent contact pages. Those were the kinds of relationships that we built when we built our household relationships. By changing that to using the contact type of household, if somebody has a household relationship or a household contact, it will change the distribution ID for those individuals in the result set. It'll change that distribution ID to the ID of whatever's tied to that contact, to the data export type. So we can look at the results of this query after I change the data export type to household. And if you look down the distribution ID column, we can see everybody who is part of the Wolf household because they all share the same distribution ID now. And that's because Bob Wolf is the head of household. And my ID is 333333333, however many nines it takes to get to 3. The other thing that happens is it uses now the special salutation rule that's set up for this salutation or the household process. So now the distribution block is set up to say Wolf family for everybody who's part of that Wolf family household. And the other thing you'll notice is, well, I guess still, the distribution address is going to follow whatever the address is set up for the head of household. In this case, it's that same 1935 Silver Maple Trail. But I still haven't reduced the contents of the export. I still have multiple rows for the Wolf family. So in order to make this so that I only have one row per household, we're going to use that checkbox up at the top, which is 1 per household contact. So it'll take those 6 rows that are all part of the Wolf family and turn those into a single row that now just says Wolf family. And Joseph Steinacher, even though he lives at the same address, was not combined or sucked into the Wolf family household because he's not part of the household, even though he shares an address. So the 2 components of that, once you have your household relationships built, is to make sure you're using the contact data export, which tells us to go look to see whether or not somebody has a household relationship or a household relationship that they should be associated with. And then the second piece, which is how do I get them combined into a single row, each household combined into a single row. We use the 1 per household contact checkbox. One of the, now I don't know if it's an unintended consequence, but the initial intent of the household relationships was to allow you to combine people, combine constituents who live at the same household. And that initial definition was based on whether or not they live at the same household or they share a same address. It is possible that over time, I might want to, my child moves out of the house, and so they get a new address, Emma gets a new address. I might want to keep her in my household. So even though the address changes, she's still part of my household. She'd still get combined into the Wolf family when we're doing the mailing. Now, I would say that's not standard procedure. I would say most of the time we're going to be looking at people in a household because they do share an address. So our standard process when somebody's address changes is to make sure we're looking at that address match page to determine if somebody's in a household, and as we're changing their address, make the determination as whether or not they should still remain within that household, because they can stay in the household even though their address changes. So the problem then is, over time, we might end up, because we said it was a good idea at this point to not remove her from the household, but then we lose track of her, and a couple years down the road, and she's still part of the same household, and we want to be able to clean those up. So it was difficult to find that match, the mismatch for people who share a household relationship, but they don't have the same addresses anymore. We added a new report that's available in 4.5 that lets you find those mismatches between household members. So it's an export report, and really it just tells you whether or not the head of household's address that was used to create the relationship is still the same as the relationship or the household member's address that's part of that relationship. If they're different, they show up on the report. You can then choose to go in and find those households and remove those people that don't belong there. It's a manual process, which it needs to be, because we're giving you that flexibility. but there is at least a report out there that helps you to maintain that at this point. The whole process of address match, turning on household relationships, building the salutation type that needs to be out there for naming the wolf family or the wolf household, whatever you want that salutation to be. There are several steps within the control info that you need to make sure you're going through, setting whatever that household label is, that's that wolf family or wolf household. So deciding what you want that household salutation piece to be, turning on the household option, determining what that household relationship, what the relationship code should be, and then finally the name of the salutation that's used in this process. So turning all those on, there's some good turning all of those features on, defining them. There's some good definitions in the control info record. Also, since this was introduced in 4.4, there's a good set of documentation that was delivered with 4.4 in the user update notice that explains how to go through this, and it goes through some scenarios about how to use them. So combining address match with the ability to create households and selection wizard and distribution is really now our preferred method for coming up with these households that you can build and maintain within one. Are there any questions about either type of householding, either the household for contribution or coming up with that calculation, or the household that is tied to selection wizard that we might use for correspondence?
I have one question, Bob. Can this setup be used with queries outside of Selection Wizard?
So I imagine that it's possible, Denise. The data is there, although the query itself could be a little bit. It could work. It wouldn't be as exact as it is with the distribution process that we have today, because it's tied to a specific address and all of those moving pieces. But the data is there, so you could, in an outside process, look to see whether or not the person that you have included in your list has a household relationship with someone else, and you could pull then information from that other person that you could get to the head of household's record and get their salutation. So yeah, there would be a way to get to that using an outside process, because the data does exist.
I'm just curious if we go through the effort of setting these households up with the head and managing them through address changes and family moves and all that, if it's worth our effort to take those steps if we're not using Selection Wizard.
Right. It may be difficult. It may be more than it may not be what you'd like to do.
But certainly this is a process that we could probably get something out of the back end of if we set these up.
That's true. I mean, and it's all right there with address match, which is nice, so you can see them. If you, I'm always looking for other ways that people are trying to do things like householding. So like in this case, we've really made it dependent upon address matches, because we thought it would be easiest to manage. But if other clients have different ways to manage that, or different thoughts about how they might want to manage these households, I'd really be interested in hearing some of those ideas as well.
Okay.
Any other questions from my attendees?
I'm going to keep going. Someone else has anything to say. I, you know me, Bob, I always have a question, right?
I love it.
Is the household salutation default last name family, or is that a manual update with each person being something different?
It's a great question. So, the salutation, we use the same salutation rule for every constituent that's part of this. So, once you build that salutation, and let's say it would not have to include the last name. Um, that's how I had mine built. So it said Wolf family.
So,
There is a component of that salutation that you can pull in. Um, the hard coded value, like family or household, that can be whatever you'd like it to be, but it would be the same thing for everyone. If you choose to have it be nothing and you just want it to be the name of the head of household, that's fine as well. And if you have certain people or households where you would like to override that salutation because they want to be known as something different, you can override individually on that head of household their salutation so that it uses that custom one instead.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining in our session. As in the rest of the sessions, there will be a survey that gets sent out in about an hour. Hopefully, you take the time to answer the 5 questions that are on there for me. I do appreciate it. We have another session coming in a week. I believe we have one coming next week, and then one following that. Those are the last 2 on the schedule right now for webinars. If you have suggestions for webinars you'd love to see, I'd love to hear about them. Feel free to send an email to Bob or run it through support, and we'll see if we can put something together for you. Thank you, everyone, for joining me.